قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقولوا للناس حسنا آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Tonight we send our condolences to the master of our time and our master and the relief for the people of the world, the one that will implement justice after injustice and tyranny has spread through the world. Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mahdi, we send our condolences to him on today being the demise of his grandmother, As-Sayyida Khadija bint Khuwaylid, Ridwanullahi ta'ala alayha. However, in order not to cut between the discussion of the series, after I finish these nights on the tongue, I will have a discussion specifically for Sayyida Khadija. Now, there is a tradition, a narration on Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zayn al-Abidin, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Is it just me or is the place stuffy? Can someone please turn on the mukayyaf? You know, I feel like I've eaten 2 tons of caviar for some reason. I'm overheating. Anyway, so the Imam says, Inna lisan ابن آدم يشرف في كل يوم على جوارح. He says يشرف كل يوم على جوارحه كل صباح فيقول كيف أصبحتم. So the tongue of mankind, your tongue and my tongue, every morning presides, you know, like a king that presides in his throne, stands above all his subjects and says, كيف أصبحتم, you know, how was your night, how's your day? He says this to all the body parts, every body part you have. And they reply, فيقولون بخير إن تركتنا. Listen. So they say, we are good as long as you let us be. It's a bit like that story they say that there was a canary that was flying and landed on a branch. When this canary was falling off the branch and he managed to get his step back, he moved to the side and edged himself back, losing balance. What happened? A cat came by and said, Allah, Allah, you know, careful. He replied, Bislam minnik wa ana bkhair min Allah. In other words, that it doesn't matter if I'm falling or not, as long as I don't fall before you and you eat me. The body parts say to the tongue, listen, we're all good as long as you leave us. Why? They say, Allah, Allah fina ويناشدون ويقولون إنما نثاب ونعاقب بك. That we are rewarded and we are punished through you. The tongue is the one that affects everybody. It is the first thing that will affect the entire body. So they say, we're all right as long as you keep us at peace today. We mentioned about the taqwa of the tongue. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, وَلْيَخْتَزِنَ الرَّجُلُ لِسَانَهُ فَإِنَّ هَذَا اللِّسَانَ جَمُوحٌ بِصَاحِبِهِ. That your tongue, jamuh, meaning what? You know when you have a wild, in Australia they call them brumbies. A brumby in Australia is a wild horse. You know, in the USA, I think they call them, they're called a Mustang. A Mustang and a brumby. This horse is wild, it's an untamed wild horse. And you have to be able to bring it under control. The tongue is like this. It's an untamed horse. It is an untamed beast. The Imam says, جَمُوحٌ بِصَاحِبِهِ, that it's something that does not yield easily. It doesn't come under control easily. That I have to try as much as I can to bring this tongue under control. Then he says, Wallah, he swears by God. Remember, when the Imam ever, or the Messenger of God, alayhi afdal salatu wassalam, ala ahli bayti at-tayyibin at-tahirin, if they ever swear by God, it's not like when you and I swear to God. When I or you or I swear to God, we say Wallah in order for someone to believe us. So Wallah ma amilta. The Imam doesn't need you to believe him. When the Imam says Wallah, when the Imam says Wallah this or Wallah that, it's a double underline. It means please pay attention to what I'm about to say. What I say usually is important, but this is extremely important. You know, in other words, this will be in the test. This is something you better pay attention to. He says, Wallah, ma ara abdan yattaqiri taqwa تنفعه حتى يختزن لسانه. That the only taqwa, he says the taqwa that is of most benefit is what? Because we have this thing with our tongue, having this looseness. He says there's no taqwa of benefit to you control your tongue. Of the things that I mentioned yesterday that I would talk about, and I've introduced the verse وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. This was a covenant. You know, when you hear the word covenant, covenant is a contract, is an agreement. But whenever you hear the word covenant, it is an agreement between God and one of his subjects, God and one of his slaves, the creator and one of the creation. It is called a covenant. It means an agreement. It is an oath that you give. When you get up and say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, you're giving an oath. You're testifying that there's no deity, there is no God except Allah. A covenant between Allah and Banu Israel was what? One of them, of the conditions, Allah ta'buduna illallah wa bil walidayni ihsana wa dhil qurba wal yatama wa ibn as-sabil wa qulu lin nasi husna. One of the conditions between Banu Israel and Allah Azza wa Jalla, the covenant, was that you say kind words to people. You say good words. Last night, Samahta Sayyid mentioned in his discussion, those that were present for the Arabic and listen, that you are expected to do good to everyone. You are expected to do good to everyone, not necessarily only a believer. You're supposed to do good to all people. You're supposed to be someone that's pleasant. You're not supposed to be someone that people deter from. So, here he says you shall speak good words to people. Now, we notice when we enter an argument with one another, the argument initially begins how? We begin discussing and we are objective, it's constructive, and then one person has an opinion which is higher than the others, and more sound, and more reasonable, and more logical. Now the one on the receiving end of this argument, in the losing position, may stand down and say, you know what, you're right. This usually happens 1% of the time. No one likes to look bad. Everyone likes to make it, you know, even in sports, when a team loses, their team could lose 40-0, for example, in a football game. And they come back and they say, oh yeah, the referee robbed us. You know, they come up with someone has to come up with an excuse. People don't like to stand down so easily. What happens when I'm being beaten in an argument? I usually resort to what they call in, you know, the discipline of arguing or debating, they call argumentum ad hominem. When you actually attack the person. When you stop debating the subject, you start to say someone, yeah, but your nose is big. Or, you know, you have this many toes on your feet. Or whatever. You come up in your argument, I'm trying to be as pleasant as possible. Usually the words are different to what I used. That you start to slander the other person. You start to talk to this person in a manner, or you're on the receiving end, in a manner that is awful or filthy or derogatory. Something that is un-Islamic. Now sometimes people deter from these people. They avoid these people. The narration says about someone who has a filthy tongue. It says, "Man khafa an-nasu lisanahu fahuwa min ahl an-nar." Let's begin with this. You know, sometimes you're involved with a problem with someone. You hear this all the time. You argue with someone, and then there's someone else gets involved and you walk away. And you say, oh, why did you leave the other person? You say, هذا مجرس or him مجرس. That this person has no limits. They'll start talking with the honor and whatever. They don't care. They're willing to pull down everything off their body in public. They don't care. That they're willing to show they have no faith publicly. So the narration, he says, "Man khafa an-nasu lisanahu fahuwa min ahl an-nar." That if people are afraid of what comes from your tongue, they know that your tongue is violent, that your tongue is filthy, then you are of the inhabitants of the fire of hell. Another narration says, "Sharru an-nas man akramahu an-nasu ittiqa'a fahshih." Sharru an-nas means the most vicious of people. Most vicious does not mean most violent. A lot of people associate viciousness with violence. Vicious person is someone that has vices, someone that is immoral. You know what we call in our mujtama a wisakh or a wati. Someone that is immoral. The most, here the narration says, the most immoral people is the one that people treat nicely. You know, good doggy as they go past. They treat nicely because they're afraid of his tongue. You know, some people, they walk past, they go, this guy's tongue's filthy, watch what you say around him. He quickly speaks, as they say, from the belly button and down. That's how he speaks. That they're used to this person is slanderous. This person is referred to as the most vicious of people, most immoral. In another narration says, "Inna min sharri ibadillah man tuqra mujalasatih li fahshih." That the worst or most immoral of the servants of God is the one, you know, the one where people don't like to sit in their presence. Taban, wicked people sit with each other. Someone that's immoral sits with someone that's immoral. But I'm talking about the righteous people, the good people don't like to sit with people that have filthy tongues. They avoid this seating. In another tradition, another narration, these are important. Because in the end, don't forget, what I have to say is irrelevant. Because I'm like you. I'm worse than you. Don't even think that when I get up that I'm trying to be exemplary. These words are the words of the ones that are exemplary. Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad alayhim afdal as-salatu was-salam. And all I'm doing is conveying their words to you. Remember that. That's the way. This is what's important. For me, I'm just a vessel that's come to give you what they have. That's why I use their words, because they are far better than any other words. Kalamukum nur. So the next tradition that is mentioned, the next hadith, it says, حرم الله الجنة على كل فاحش بذيء. That Allah has made paradise forbidden upon who? Those with filthy tongues, and the words that come out of their mouth are immoral. Haram, that they don't have anything to do with paradise. Now, when we read Dua Qumail, we speak in the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, where he says that our weapon is what? The weapon of the believer is the dua. This is our main weapon. We strike people with our supplications. When we supplicate, we do dua. This is the way that we reply. This is the most important thing. Taban, I'm not saying that that's how you fight. When someone is attacking you, you need to defend yourself. But we use our major weapon. Our main weapon is dua. And the believers, before they used to go to battle, they used to make dua. Even today, when there is jihad and there is battle, a lot of the people that are fighting, the Muslimin that fight today, they read dua ahl al-thaghur, don't they? They read the dua to fight. Dua is their main weapon. They tell you that. We were a very weak army. How we defeated them? بِقُدْرَةِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. This is the way that they perceive it. Because it's all related to dua. As for the weapon of the villains, silahul li'am, qabihul kalam. The weapon of the villains to have a filthy tongue, because people avoid them, like I said, because of their tongue. Now, you have a verse in the Quran that says, وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the Holy Quran that Iblis will partner mankind with what? With their children and their wealth. People ask this question, how does Iblis partner you with your children? How is this possible? وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ. How can he be a partner? Now, طبعا, the mother is the mother. But the father's seed is mixed with the seed of shaitan. For example, we have a lot of traditions that if someone is in the state of janaba, that when they're with their wife, if they're in the state of ritual impurity, and they sleep with their wife once again, that seed has got the touch of Satan within it. Because he is in the state of janaba. There are other traditions that work along these lines. Of the traditions, من علامات شرق الشيطان الذي لا يشك فيه. Now there's one that without any doubt of the signs that there is no doubt, okay, أن يكون فحاشا لا يبالي ما قال ولا ما قيل فيه. He says of the signs that there is no doubt therein, to be of someone who is born with the partnership between his father and Satan, is someone with a filthy tongue that does not care what he says and does not care what is said to him. Now listen to the words here. Does not care what is said. You've noticed with friendships. I remember once when we were younger, we were in some organization. Okay, so we don't get anyone to associate. There were two people in this organization. When they used to speak to each other in this manner, they would speak. We were young, and you'd listen to them. And he'd ask him, where were you? He says, I was with your mother. And they'd laugh. They would find this amusing. No honor. No shame. And they were adults. It's not like they were little kids just throwing words. This is what we are talking about. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam mentions this. Now in this other tradition that he mentions, إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ الْجَنَّةَ عَلَى كُلِّ فَحَاشٍ بَذِيءٍ. That Allah has forbidden paradise on those that have a filthy tongue. They're immoral when they speak. And then he says, قَلِيلُ الْحَيَاءِ لا يبالي ما قال ولا ما قيل له. Now the Messenger of God says that this person does not matter, does not care. Okay, لا يبالي ما قال ولا ما قيل له. That this person does not care, okay, about what he says and what is said to him. He goes on to say, that if you go look for this person, you will find that there is, he says, of the things, that there is a partnership of his seed being with Satan. Then he's asked, Ya Rasulullah, وَفِي النَّاسِ شِرْقُ الشَّيْطَانِ, is there people that have in their seed the partnership of Satan? فَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ أَمَا تَقْرَأ عفوا قول الله عز وجل وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ. Do you not read the Quran that God says that Satan will partner mankind with their wealth, with their children? And then the man says, and the narration says, he says, وَسَأَلَ رَجُلٌ فَقِيهًا. Not just an ordinary person, a man that has insight in knowledge, insight in jurisprudential knowledge. He says, هَلْ فِي النَّاسِ مَنْ لَا يُبَالِ مَا قِيلَ لَهُ. Listen to this. You know, sometimes if I was to ask you generally, how many people here would care if someone spoke bad about them? In terms of their honor, someone spoke bi'urdak. No one. Everyone says, no way, I would never expect someone to speak like this about me. However, then he says, he replies like this just to make sure that you understand. He says, قَالَ مَنْ تَعَرَّضَ لِلنَّاسِ يَشْتِمُهُمْ وَهُوَ يَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَتْرُكُونَ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي لَا يُبَالِ مَا قَالَ وَلَا مَا قِيلَ فِيهِ. You know, the one that goes out and swears to others, knowing that they will respond. He's someone that doesn't care. So when I think, you know, some people think that they reach a friendship. You know, in a friendship, you need to understand a friendship and a brotherhood, what they are. Your brother should have more rights than everyone else upon you. Doesn't mean when someone's your brother, then you become shameless with them. I remember once, someone was mentioning about the coach of the New South Wales State of Origin team, that he was always nude when he was a player. He enters the hotel room, he's completely nude. And I was talking to my child's kindergarten teacher, and I go, look at this world, it's so sick and twisted. Now she's of Greek origin, so I thought she still has Mediterranean blood, they still have the ghira and all that. And I said, even to the point that the coach of a football team which kids are watching, well, you enjoyed being nude in front of other men. And she said, what's wrong with that? And then I got a slap in the face and I realized who I was talking to. I realized these people, it's normal for some of these people. If we're all nude, it's okay. The world is so sick and twisted. Just today I was reading an article, just a point for you to read. Anyone want to Google it, go Google. It was an article that was basically not really defending, but giving you a nice opinion of pedophilia. In the Telegraph of, you know, read it, in the United Kingdom, because after Rolf Harris got caught out, and you know, Rolf Harris was an Australian icon and also a British icon, they wanted to make Rolf Harris look normal. So they said the majority, you read this article, you'll freak out, of normal people, normal males, have sexual tendencies towards children. Go read the article. It's in the British Telegraph. This is the world you live in. You'd be surprised. I want to tell you how desensitized you've become. How many of you find it normal when you have a colleague that is openly homosexual? You talk to them at work, it's normal, you've been desensitized. In the future, you'll have a person come over and he's a pedophile. And you say, all right, kids, go inside. Hey, go and take a seat. Kids, stay inside, don't come. You become desensitized. It will become normal because, okay, there's my neighbor, Mr. Robinson, and his, 4-year-old boyfriend. Because you're thinking it's funny. You're thinking this is funny. It isn't the case, because what happens when Robert Dolly Dunn was thrown in jail, when he was out in Thailand with all these young boys and they threw him in jail, he said, one day my legacy will live on. He was proud of what he done. He says, I'm normal. I prefer young boys. This is what's happening to the world. Why? Because people have not said anything. They just accept it, get with the times. If it's normal, you can do it. Don't challenge these things. Don't question these things. Accept these things. Who honestly would have believed? When you read this article, you're going to freak out. I want you to go home and Google this. Write the Telegraph. It's in the telegraph.co.uk. It's a British newspaper. And write this study about pedophilia. And they say, it's normal, men have these tendencies. What can we do about it? They're opening the gates. Before you know it, it will be normal. So anyway, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions also, the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions that Inna Allah yabghad al-fahish al-mutafahish. That Allah Azza wa Jal hates the one that is filthy in the manner that they act and they speak. These people that speak in a filthy and immoral manner. On top of that, Allah Azza wa Jal does not accept the dua of the one with a filthy tongue. There is a story where the narration says, كان في بني إسرائيل رجل فدعا الله أن يرزقه غلاما ثلاث سنين. So for 3 years, this person of Bani Israel would do dua that he wanted a child. For 3 years he would do dua. And he saw that God would not answer his dua. He said, "Oh Allah, are you far away that you do not hear my dua? Or are you close? Okay? And you are hearing me. In other words, are you close and you hear my dua but you're not accepting it?" He didn't receive a reply. Then one day he saw in his dream. He saw in his dream, Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi. He saw a righteous man in his dream, and this man said, "Innaka tad'u Allah Azza wa Jal," for 3 years. Okay? But then he says, "Mundu thalath sinin bilisanin badi." That you have been doing dua, but your tongue is filthy. That you swear a lot. Then he says, in this narration, that your heart does not have taqwa. This is as a result of having this filthy tongue. And your niyyah is not pure. This is a result of having this filthy tongue. He says, now remove the filthiness from your tongue, and your niyyah will change, and then Allah Azza wa Jalla will answer your prayers. So the man, as the narration says, began to, remember I mentioned the issue of the swear jar. Well, this is the best thing anyone can do to clean their tongue. Take a little, you don't need a notepad and pen. Most people have smartphones these days. For those that don't know what a smartphone is and have been living on Mars for the last 10 years, it looks like something like this, or most people should know, but some people still carry Nokias. But in this, you have notes. You can write within this note, أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. So anyway, in this notebook that you have, in these notes that you have, you can actually write down, for example, every time that you say a word that is illicit, just put 1 point. Then another point. Then another point. And I mentioned the example that I told with a person that I asked to do this. The first day he paid over $30. The second day he paid $2. The third day he went to zero. Because it bit him in his pocket. He felt the bite. See, I'm not just here to read a narration and tell you this is what's bad, but I'm giving you a solution. This is a practical solution. When you start paying, as part of assessing yourself, don't wait till you're in the grave. Fix yourself now. Don't wait till it's all over. Fix yourself now. For every expletive that you say, put $1. then another, then another. Within 2-3 days you'll be remedied. Even a millionaire doesn't like to pay. They don't even like to pay a single cent. Proof of this. Take a look around the world when it comes to giving money. Everyone says, Wallahi azami ma'aish masari, there's nothing, I'm left with nothing. I'm dying, I've only got 200 acres, but that's it. I've run out. This is how people are. So the second they have to pay a cent, they feel it. It bites them in the pocket. This is if you want to rectify yourself. And obviously you people are present here on these nights, these blessed nights in Shahr Ramadan al-Mubarak, to rectify yourself. So, in another tradition, and taban tomorrow night we will continue, we were talking about 2 subjects. One is lying, the other is qadhaf, which has got to do with the tongue as well. Okay, and we'll discuss them then. But one man who's with the 6th Imam, Al-Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq, salatullah wa salamu alayh, the Imam says, I saw you having an altercation. You had an argument with someone. And in this moment, he mentions 3 words. He says that you were being a fahash in this. And in the other words that he mentions are all with relation to this, being someone that swears and curses. And the man says, but the other man oppressed me, dhalamni. See, sometimes someone does something small, then we reply, we do overkill. Our reply is always worse. See, someone hits you once and then you run over them with your car. This isn't something that's equal. So then the Imam says to him, what you've done is overkill. What you've done is in excess of what he initially done to you. So he says, what do I do, Ya Ibn Rasulullah? He says, repent for what you've done. As the Imam prevents people from being like this. Even when it comes to certain times where people try and make excuses for using such language. They say, we're close friends, that's all right. We don't have boundaries. I swear about his mother, he swears about my mother, and we're happy. You might laugh. There are people like that. They find it normal. And it began with what? I remember when I was in high school, it all began with this habit that people began where they call each other by their mother's names. They would call this person Fulani, and the other person would reply. Then after a while, it would move from one step to the other. And the boundaries would break. And the people thought that the more shameless we are with each other, the nearer we are to each other. This isn't what Islam requires from us. This isn't the way those that before us, that were sent by Allah Azza wa Jal, taught us to be like. In fact, if you notice the relationship, Taban there was mazah, they used to joke with each other, but it wasn't disrespectful. They were pleasant to each other, it wasn't disrespectful. So I need to assess this problem. I need to remedy this problem. Taban, I don't assume anyone that's here is like this, but I know you know people that are like this. And this is your job. You have to convey what you learn, just as I'm conveying what I've learned. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to purify our tongues, so that our hearts are purified and our intentions are purified. Because only the one with a purified soul, with Al-Qalb Al-Salim, is the one that enters paradise, is the one that is granted Allah's mercy. وهذا والحمد لله رب العالمين وصل اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.